first line of defense against attack. They've been filled up with some water from the river. The crack in the wall here, that is an arrow loop. And Archie would have stood there, keeping an eye on the surrounding area. If he saw something he didn't like, he would yell up, and the castle would prepare for attack by bringing up the drawbridge, which had been located in front of the castle walls here.
Aha.
Now, this is my third part of my job. Opening the castle door.
This is the old moat.
Is sadly not original. It's a reproduction based on a door in Kilkenny. But basically this is what it would have basically looked like. The metal points in the door, they're called brags. And what they do is reinforce the door by combining a vertical and horizontal piece of wood together. Now, here.
Wow.
Now, if you look up, you'll see a wooden ceiling. But if you were here in Norman times, up there you would have seen something called a murder hole. The name, but if you've seen films or anything like that, you know, for boiling hot oil on bathing hearts.
Oh.
That didn't happen because much like today, oil was far too expensive to waste like that. Instead, they throw rocks, hot water, and toilets.
Oh.
In the army here. This here is called the portcullis. It is one of only two in Ireland that actually work. The other is in Cairn Castle. Now it takes 10 men to bring this down safely, and 10 men to bring it back up again. The problem with the portcullis is if you bring it down too slowly, it basically shatters under its own weight. Which isn't great. So the portcullis would only be brought down as a last resort. So the first thing they would do is actually send men to prop their bodies up against this door to prevent it from breaking under a battering ram from the attacking army. If the door was about to crack, they would then start lowering this down slowly. That gave time to the attacking army to actually beat the portcullis. They could do this in one of two ways. They either send a man in full armour, racing the portcullis into the outer bailey. The thing about the Normans, they were only 5 foot to 5'5". So we'll see examples of that later on in the castle. They basically run in and get inside here. And that would basically slow down the attack because the people up there who were bringing down the portcullis would have to start fighting. The other way they could do it is by sending a load of horses through the broken down door, allow the portcullis to hit the horses, killing the horses, and giving enough room for the Normans to come crawling under the gap made. Interesting enough, if you look up portcullis in Wikipedia, that's the first thing that appears. Now go to your left here. That is Gibbon Moat. You won't find one of these in Ireland anywhere else. The water would have flown into a gap in the wall down there. They would fill up this entire area with water, acting as the first line of defense against attack. A second line of defense against attack. There would have been a secondary drawbridge located up there that would have risen up to prevent attackers getting inside the inner bailey where the ruler and his family would have lived. Now, behind you here is the oldest part of our castle. Constructed between 1200 and 1210. Originally, the ruler would have slept on the top floor while the servants and animals slept on the ground floor. The reason for that is their warmth would rise up and keep the ruler nice and warm. Now, as the wealth and power of this site expanded, so did the castle. The first addition were the curtain walls which surround this entire site. They basically sealed it in and created the outer bailey over there. The next addition was the secondary wall here and the secondary drawbridge. That created the inner bailey, the earl, the inner bailey and keep. The earl, then the ruler / earl, would have left this building here and moved up there. This then became a dining hall for a few years, but once the great hall over there behind you was built, this building took on administrative functions. So if you had to pay your taxes or sign the registrar when you were getting married, you'd come through the gatehouse here, up a set of wooden stairs inside the building. Now, window on your left, that is an original window from the 1200s. Window on your right is a reconstruction done by our expert stonemasons in-house by hand. Made of sandstone, interesting enough, so they would have to have quarried that in Tipperary and brought it all the way over here, which really shows how rich the people who were building this castle were.
Wow.
Now, folks, any questions?
No.
We're now about to head into the outer bailey, which really is the beating heart of this castle. That, of course, the sound wouldn't be heard back when this castle was in operation. I believe that's the Ryanair plane to Spain going to Channel. Anyway, the outer bailey is the beating heart of this castle. Castles like this had to be so mainly because there were no roads in Ireland to transport goods. See, the Romans never came to Ireland. They called Ireland Hibernia, the land of always winter. So instead of roads, made in the ground, cattle traveled on to go to various centres of Ireland. See, before the Romans arrived, Gaelic Ireland was quite different from the rest of Europe. Gold didn't matter to these people. What mattered was cattle. So cattle were used for dowries when you were getting married. They were used for trade. You were used to show what local king you were loyal to. Basically, the king would show up to your home, which was a ring fort, with a herd of cattle. He would then leave the cattle with you for you to look after. Then once a year he would return and expect to be fed and entertained for you, called the guesting season. And that's how he knew you were loyal to him only, and he'd protect you in times of war. When the Normans arrived, they used these cattle paths as roads. The problem was, there was no maps made of the cattle paths, so they had no idea where half of them went. That gave rise to the forest people, which weren't leprechauns or fairies. They were actually the Irish, the Gaels, who used to hide in the forest, and when they saw a Norman caravan travelling, they'd jump out, steal all the goods off the back, and then run back into the forest. They were quite annoying to the Normans, so they had to make everything in-house. So around the walls here, you've had various craftsmen, fletchers, weavers, candlestick makers, blacksmiths. Through that gate there, you'd had labourers bringing in grains from the fields. Through that gate, you'd have goods coming in from the town of Adair next door. You'd have had animals in here, cattle, sheep, horses. You'd have warriors trading. In total, you'd have about 200 to 250 people in this castle on a daily basis. As such, it's quite noisy, smelly, and dirty. Now, behind that tree over there, there is something called a garderobe. Now, a garderobe, for all intents and purposes, is a medieval toilet. The Normans would have actually hung their clothes over. The reason for that is ammonia would rise up and kill fleas or other pests that would have jumped on their clothes from their animals. Excuse me, thank you. Yes, so they could go about their day with not clean clothes, but pest-free clothes. Now, I've been told that this here is the perfect postcard shot of our castle, if anyone likes ace of photos.
Is this one's 1200 as well?
No, that part of the castle was from probably 1270 to 1300. The castle was built in stages over its life. This was the second last place built. This was built in the late 1300s, the Great Hall. Again, this is actually one of the best preserved Norman castles in Ireland, believe it or not. Tell you why it was. I'll tell you why in a few moments, but yeah. So where are you folks from yourselves?
Seattle.
Ah, the Pacific Northwest.
Yes.
That's us.
Thank
You're
you.
used to the rain then.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. In fact, it's storming and thunder and stuff they say today.
I hope that's right. That's why I gave my colleague back at the centre the afternoon tour. So. We're going to head down here now. Into the Great Hall, or as we'd probably call it, the dining room. Carefully watch your step here. Now, you'll notice two Romanesque windows here in the centre. Now, these are fascinating because they would have been installed. As the castle was built, and they would have actually had red stained glass. So red stained glass was incredibly expensive. Even cathedrals would have used it sparingly. So to have it put into a dining room really shows how wealthy the people who owned this castle truly were. Now you notice the doorway over here that leads to nothing. Now that doorway actually led onto a dock of boats. We believe guests of the feast would actually have sailed up the river, docked over there, and entered the feast that way.
Fish and chicken.
That is one of two docks, actually.
There's a big ass trout right there. You have your glasses on? Do people still fish in this river?
Yes, it has salmon and trout.
Yeah, I can see a big trout right there.
If you'd like a fishing license, it costs €100, and you can have unlimited fishing for 5 years.
Did you see the fish?
Interestingly enough, the Adair Manor actually owns the exclusive fishing rights for that portion of the river. But everything after the bridge
$100 for €100 for 5 years. That might be a good buy for you.
Yeah. I just seen a big old trout.
Heading on to my favourite part of the castle. This is the buttery. Yeah, sadly, nothing to do with butter. It's actually the origin of the word butler in the English language. In here, servants would have prepared food from the kitchens. They would have placed onto silver plates and taken them out into the dining hall. Now, what's interesting about medieval feasting like this is they wouldn't have used a fork, as that was seen as barbaric. Instead, they would have used their own knife, which they would have brought with them, cut food from a central serving plate and placed it on their own plates. They then would have used their hands exclusively to eat food. There also would have been table sauces as well. Now, in here also, there would have been a store of wine and beer. This is probably one of the most important parts of the castle. Now, behind you here, you'll see a room with a square. And that square is actually a kiln. Like I said, these castles were self-sufficient, so they had to make everything in-house, including various jars and pots. But because of that kiln, that room was incredibly hot. They would have used it for two other important jobs. Firstly, they would have brewed their own beer. Now, brewing beer is hugely important in medieval settlements, as while this is fresh water, and they weren't drinking from it, well, they were dumping their toilet, so it wasn't exactly the cleanest. So they drink a lot of beer instead. Now, there's a Viking manuscript from around 900 Dyson, or we probably call it Dublin, that states children as young as 5 would drink a pint of beer a day. So I'm sure it is that. Yeah. Interesting enough, Dublin's name literally, because the Liffey is so dark. The other important job that was carried on there is actually the drying of grain. Now, drying grain is hugely important in medieval settlements as well, as grain can become infested with the ergot fungus. Now, if you ingest ergot, it can cause hallucinations or death. Now, ergot poisoning has happened quite a lot in European history. One such instance was recorded in the 1300s in the German city of Frankfurt. The city had a poor harvest of grain. They brought it into the city, milled it down, and made it into bread. People who ate this bread came down with a dancing plague, in which they all spontaneously started dancing for 2 weeks straight, and they all dropped dead. Dancing plagues happened all over Europe, in fact, during the Middle Ages. Another instance occurred in the 1400s over in France. A monastery of nuns, they too had infested bread, but instead of dancing, they all started meowing for a month. They only stopped actually when they ran out of bread. The final incident I should talk about is over in the States. Scientists believe that the Salem witch trials were brought on by hallucinations started by ergot-infested grain.
Same thing with the Bible.
Yeah. Now, witch trials weren't all that common in Europe. They were common in the continent, but not in the UK and Ireland. In fact, in the UK and Ireland, there was only ever about 2,000 witch trials between the 1500s and 1700s. In Germany, however, there was over 24,000 witch trials.
Oh.
If you look over the river there, you'll see a tower off in the distance. That is the Adair Manor, a 5-star hotel. Now, Irish history is very long and bloody. As such, the earls who lived in our castle and the earls who lived over there in the manor are actually not connected. The final earl who lived in our castle was the Earl of Desmond during the Second Desmond Rebellions against the British Crown. As you can imagine, these rebellions failed and him and his family fled to Spain, where his descendants still live to this day, actually. Now, these lands were then given over to the Earl of Kildare. Now, Kildare is actually over in the east of the country by Dublin, so quite a distance away from Adair, so it started to decline at this point. Now, the Earls of Kildare would own these lands until the late 1630s, when the Earls of Ireland, fearful that their position would be, destroyed by English rule, rose up against the Kingdom of England and formed a breakaway nation called the Irish Confederation. Now, the reasons for this breakaway are quite fascinating. You see, the monasteries of Adare were destroyed in the 1500s by King Henry VIII during the Protestant Reformation. Now, while England converted mostly over to Protestantism, the Irish earls and actually Irish people remained Catholic. Now, England fears that having a Catholic nation within their wider kingdom would open the door to invasion from Spain, started to remove powers that the earls had been granted for hundreds of years in order to get more control over Ireland, and they also started bringing in Protestant settlers into the north of Ireland during the plantations. Now, these planters were only loyal to the Kingdom of England and not to the local earls. So by the mid-1600s, the earls were mostly sick of this and decided, if this carries on anymore, our power will be ultimately destroyed. So they broke away and, like I said, formed the Irish Confederation. Their flag, interestingly enough, was a gold banner was a green banner with a gold harp, and was the first use of green to symbolise Ireland. That's why it's been carried forward since then. Don't worry, that's golf course. Now, the Confederation Wars would really only last about 2 to 3 years, depending, because right in the middle of this, the English Civil War would break between royalist forces led by King Charles I and parliamentary forces led by Oliver Cromwell, who was a Puritan, which is a harsh sect of Protestantism, and well, he really hated the Catholics. Now, the Irish earls felt that they would actually get a better peace treaty from the king rather than Oliver Cromwell. So they actually allied with King Charles I during the Civil War, and actually sent men over to England to fight for the king. However, the all for naught, as the English Civil War would end with Oliver Cromwell's victory and King Charles I executed. The Kingdom of England was then dissolved, and in its place the Commonwealth of
these
England
little red
was
bugs.
formed
They're
with
all
Oliver
over.
Cromwell as Lord Protector. The Cromwellian army would then invade Ireland and destroy hundreds of castles like this across the island, including our own. They used cannons. In this case, cannons were set up on the opposite riverbank. They fired into the castle, destroying it. Archaeologists have actually found cannons and cannonballs over there.
Did they get
And
on?
a man from the village once climbed all the way up to the top of that tower there and found an intact cannonball.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he can't really tell anything. He can't really display it because it's incredibly illegal, and he'll be sent to prison for stealing historical monuments. Now, after this point, the Earls of Ireland basically surrendered. Their lands were taken from them and given over to English control. But that would only last about 10 years, as Oliver Cromwell would die. His son would take over for 2 years, but eventually the Commonwealth of England would be disbanded, and King Charles II, son of King Charles I, would be returned from exile in the Netherlands and given the crown of England, restoring the Kingdom of England. Now, the Earls of Ireland actually felt that their land would be restored to them automatically, and they were for the most part, except they had to convert to Anglicanism, which, in the case of the Earl of Kildare, he did. This land was returned to him. And he would own these lands until the late 1700s. Late 1600s, early 1700s, when a man would come to the village by the name of Taddy Quinn. Now, Taddy was a very successful lawyer from County Clare. He actually rented the lands the castle stands on and the manor currently stands on from the Earl. Now, he would have a son named Valentine Quinn, who would buy the lands outright and build a small manor house where the Adare Manor currently sits, called Adare House. It was built in the Georgian style. Now, Valentine would have a son also named Valentine, who would actually become an earl in his own right, the Earl of Mount Earl. He basically controlled all these lands around here. He was the owner and landlord. Now, Valentine the Earl would have a son called Wyndham Quinn, who would go to Wales and meet a girl called Caroline, whose father was the owner of most of the coal mines in southern Wales. So So as you can imagine, with the Industrial Revolution starting up, he was incredibly wealthy. So Wyndham went to the father-in-law and said,
Wyndham.
look, I'll marry your
City
daughter,
in
and I'll even
my
take
dad
on
was
the name of
born.
your house, Castle Dunraven, and add it to my own title to make it look like you have nobility. And in return, I'll get all your money. And, well, the father-in-law agreed, and Caroline and Wyndham were wed, and he became the Earl of Dunraven and Mount Earl. At that point, the Dunraven name comes to Adair, and the money starts flowing into Adair as well. And now, Wyndham and Caroline actually went on a massive honeymoon when they were wed. They went to Paris, the Cologne, the Hague. They even went as far as Alberta in Canada in the early part of the 1800s. So, indeed. So eventually they travelled back to Adair, and they moved into the Adair house, and they felt it wasn't befitting an earl. So they tore it down, and they got the architects who designed the Houses of Parliament in Westminster to design them a brand new manor house. And he designed them a calendar house. Now, the Adair Manor House, 365 stained glass windows, 52 chimney pots, 12 fireplaces, 7 columns, and 4 towers. Hello there. Okay. Anyway, yeah, 4 towers. Sadly, Wyndham wouldn't actually see his house finished. He would die. It took 30 years to build, and he would die after 20, leaving his son, the third Earl of Dunraven, to finish out construction. Now, the Dunravens would actually live in the manor until 1982, when they would sell it to an American couple by the name of Tom and Judy Kane. They would turn it into the first 5-star Adair Manor hotel. They would run it until 2013, when it was sold to local billionaire J.P. McManus for €28 million. He then invested €500 million into refurbishing works, turning into the 5-star hotel we know today. Anyone staying there, sir? No? Would anyone like to know how much it costs to stay there tonight? Curious. €1,000 for the smallest room, $5,500 for a suite.
Wow.
They offer a helicopter transport from whatever airport you land in to the hotel.
Wish I'd have known that.
That's very handy.
So you mentioned the 365 stained glass windows. Does that have anything to do with how many days in the year?
Exactly. That's why they're called calendar houses.
Ah, right. I gotcha.
So any questions?
I'm still spinning on the fact that they give you a helicopter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.